third option. Today, what we're going to be talking about is going to be how they come up with an idea to maybe get the best of both worlds from those two options that are very much a rock and a hard place. What the Germans come up with is going to be a plan that's actually awfully clever. What they come up with, this will cooperate, is going to be a way to keep the Americans out of the war in Europe while at the same time using the submarines. Let's see. There we go. What they come up with is a plan that's going to be known as the Zimmermann telegram. Now, I want you to kind of keep something in mind here. This incident is going to take place in 1917. The Lusitania went down in 1915. It's been 2 years of this war dragging on with this kind of strange balance where the Germans are going to suspend the submarine warfare to keep the Americans out of the war. What the Zimmermann telegram is going to be is their third option. This is going to be a secret letter that's transmitted from a German official. His name is Arthur Zimmermann. Arthur Zimmermann is going to send this telegram to the German ambassador in Mexico. And he gives him very specific instructions where he says, I need you to offer up a deal to Mexico. I want you to give them a proposed alliance between Mexico and Germany. Now, I kind of just want to throw this out there. Any real reason why Germany and Mexico should be allied together? Do they share any kind of interest?
No.
Not really? So why on earth would Germany say, let's get Mexico involved in this war? Gabrielle, what do you think?
Just in case America turns their back against Germany.
Sure.
So that they have Mexico that's connected.
Sure. You're absolutely right. Mexico is basically the German insurance policy. If the Americans get involved, Germany tells them, your job is to simply harass the Americans. Make their focus not in Europe. Make their focus their own southern border. Keep them out of Europe. Keep them on the sidelines. Now, let me just kind of say this. Is this actually a pretty good idea?
Yeah.
This is their way out of that rock and a hard place situation.
Why would Mexico take the deal?
I think that's an excellent question, Ethan. First thing, Germany's going to tell them, we promise we will finance your entire war effort. It won't cost you a dime. And we're going to put a cherry on top. Now hold on to that question real fast. This letter is going to be intercepted. Now, it's very possible that the person who intercepted this was a British spy. We think so. We're not certain. This spy has in his hands this letter, this plan of a German-Mexico alliance. And as he's reading through, he reads that Germany is proposing, when the war is over, we promise we'll give you Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona as a cherry on top. This is going to be your spoils of war. Now, the Germans have been paying attention because they know these three states were acquired by the United States in such a way that Mexico might want them. Do you remember? How did the United States get those states? Was it, Brendan, you remember? When? During what war?
I don't know.
What was it?
What is the Spanish?
Not Spanish. We're fighting Spain in the Spanish-American War. Was it?
Mexican-American War.
The Mexican-American War is how the United States acquired these states. Germany simply says, if you just harass the Americans, if you just keep them on the sidelines, keep them out of the war in Europe, we promise when the war is over, this will be your prize. Now, when this letter's intercepted, and like I said, it was probably a British spy, he has it in his hands. He's reading through it saying, this is it. This is what's going to push the Americans to war. But Woodrow Wilson's a pacifist. He doesn't want to go to war. Maybe even this isn't enough to push him to war. But it's not the president who gets to decide if America goes to war. That power belongs to a different group of people. Do you know who gets to decide this? Who is it? Congress gets to decide this. This British spy, probably, is going to give this letter to the newspapers. They print it, and the American people are outraged by it. Almost immediately, Congress will convene, and they vote to go to war. Whether Woodrow Wilson wants to or not, it's Congress who makes that decision. In April of 1917, overwhelmingly, they vote for war. President Woodrow Wilson becomes the commander-in-chief, whether he wants to be or not. What he says is, now that Congress has declared war, it's our responsibility. We need to mobilize. We need to make the world safe for democracy. Now, maybe Woodrow Wilson here is a reluctant commander-in-chief, but it's what Congress has thrust upon him. Now it's time to mobilize. Now it's time to get ready. Now, the United States has been supplying these combatants for years, but the United States has this long-standing tradition of keeping a very small standing army. Now, we don't do it today, but up to this point, our army was really limited. In 1917, the United States had the 16th biggest army in the world. We had the same size army as Portugal. But we can expand it quickly. We're going to start asking for volunteers. Thousands upon thousands, millions of men are going to volunteer for the armed forces. Now, that's great for the army. But now they got to train all these men. These men were farmers. They were working in factories. They were college professors. You got to teach them how to be soldiers now. It's going to take time. Once they're ready, then you got to ship them across the Atlantic to Europe. It's going to take weeks, if not months, to get these American boots on the ground. We got to help our allies in another way right now. We got to start mass production. Now, I always kind of have to explain this in such a way, because people ask me all the time, well, weren't we already producing arms for the war? Yes, we were. But we were producing them for our allies. Now we're producing for ourselves, for our own soldiers. When this takes place, the Americans are going to sit down with the Brits, and I use generalities here because specifics don't really make sense. It doesn't explain it. When we sit down with the Brits, we kind of give them our production numbers and say we can produce this many ships and bullets and armaments, like per day, per week, per month. And the Brits look at these numbers and they say, this isn't possible. No one can produce this much. And the Americans just simply look back and they go, what do you mean? We're already doing it. The Brits can't wrap their minds around these numbers. Now that we're involved, those numbers are going to basically triple. We produce triple what the British thought was impossible. This is American industrial might on the world stage. We produce so much and start shipping it off to our allies. The Brits don't even really know what to do with all of it. Now we have all these supplies in huge numbers. Now the Allies are just waiting on American boots on the ground. But they got to be a little patient. It's going to take time to train this army. It's going to take time to ship them over to Europe. It's going to be a little while. And by 1917, all these empires that are involved in this war are starting to wobble. They're starting to get to a point where even though they have these huge populations, they can't sustain the casualties that they are. It's starting to catch up to them. we're going to start to see the rumblings of rebellion in every one of these empires. They're starting to somewhat fall apart. Now, the Germans probably know this better than anyone. With the Americans on the way, their window to win this war is getting smaller and smaller. All of these supplies are going to be shipped to our allies, and the balance is starting to tip. Germany and her allies are starting to lose. They're going to need some big movements real fast. Now, I need to say this real quickly. During this time, there were some real strict social norms where if you're going to work at a factory, the overwhelming majority, 99.5%, were men. Now what's happening to all these men who were working in the factories? They're going to war. They're going to the army. They're getting trained. They're being shipped over to Europe. All those factory positions are now open. Now you have to kind of think of this. Without these tools, can we go to war? We need the factories to keep running. We're going to have to change some social norms, and we're going to have to do it real fast. Because there's a quote. In fact, this is a very high-ranking American official who said, "I don't want women in the factories. I would never put my wife, my sister, my daughter into those dangerous factories." And his famous line is, "I'd rather lose the war than change our social norms that drastically." Fortunately, he's outvoted. We're going to see women and minority groups take these spots in the factories. And they do a phenomenal job. Because without them, it's very possible we might have lost the war. They're the engines that drive the war machine. Now, we're going to see a few things about this a little bit later on. But the good news is, done with notes. Can put your notebooks away. I want to watch a movie. And no notes. God bless America. You can pack everything up except for your responses for what you had before. What should we do to break the stalemate? I'm hoping I can get to where I want to be. I think I'm going to be just a little bit tight on time. We'll get as far as we can with this. Oops.
Germany's ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, is also teetering. Its peoples are starving because of the blockade. At the end of the previous year, Vienna had buried its emperor, Franz Joseph, who died at the age of 86 after reigning for over half a century. He lived long enough to witness the disaster he helped unleash after the assassination in Sarajevo in 1914. His generals had pushed the emperor into war. Now half their army is gone. What can put an end to the butchery? In his book, The World of Yesterday, Stefan Zweig captures the prevailing pessimism. He writes, "The steps of the Temple of Peace are awash in blood." It's a heavy legacy for the new emperor, Karl I. At 29, Karl is keenly aware of the fragility of his empire after its defeats, and the demands for independence by his peoples, like the Czechs, Slovaks, and Yugoslavs. Karl has served at the front. He hates war. He opposes the tactic of futile assaults with their terrible cost in human life. He and his young wife Zita are devout Catholics. What he wants, above all, is to make peace. He fears the revolutionary flames spreading from Russia. He says, the waves of revolutionary unrest will sweep everything away. If we monarchs do not make peace, the people will make it over our heads. In March 1917, he sends a secret peace proposal to Paris that interests France and England.